So good morning. Today we'll be having the class on introduction to periodontal surgery. So in this, at the end of this class, we would like you to know what is flaps, classify the flaps, list the three major incisions used in flap surgery, explain the rationale of periodontal surgery, describe the various suturing materials and methods which are available. The contents of this class would include introduction, objectives of surgery, possible results of periodontal surgery, indication of periodontal surgery, critical zones of pocket, methods for pocket therapy, surgical anatomy, which includes explaining about the maxilla, mandible, and anatomic spaces, patient preparation, which includes steps before, during, and after surgical procedures, which is to be taken, and then we'll finish it with conclusion. Excuse me. You're all aware of this preferred sequence of maintenance, wherein your maintenance therapy forms the heart of your the therapy, periodontal therapy, and starting with your emergency phase, then it moves on to the non-surgical phase, then you put the patient on the maintenance phase. After that, you put the patient either to the surgical phase and then to the restorative phase. Again, after the surgical phase, the patient has to enter the maintenance phase. After the restorative phase, the patient has to enter into the maintenance phase. So this forms the heart of the periodontal therapy. So generally, phase 1 procedures are being done in case of early problems wherein there is biofilm removal by the patient itself on a daily basis, or scaling and root training can be done by the professional. Or other words, surgical phase, even after phase 1 therapy, there is no resolving of problem, then in case we go in for surgical therapy for moderate to advanced cases. So what are the objectives of surgical therapy? It is mainly to increase the accessibility to the root surface so that we are able to reach down till the root of the tooth and able to remove the calculus or the biofilm which is stuck there, reduce or eliminate the pocket depth, reshape soft and hard tissues to attain a harmonious topography, correction of anatomical morphological defects which would include your craters or exostosis. Any of those we can correct it with the help of surgical therapy. Implant placement and post placement maintenance is one of the objectives of surgical therapy. Periodontal disease surgery, or the surgery which is aimed at reducing the periodontal disease, is mainly done to gain access to the area to eliminate the local irritants or to eliminate or reduce the pocket. Whereas periodontal plastic surgery, it is mainly done to correct the anatomic or the morphologic defects. Pre-prosthetic surgeries are done for the pre-prosthetic techniques which include your crown lengthening, ridge augmentation, and vestibular deepening. Again, surgical therapy would include pocket reduction surgeries such as your resective or your regenerative surgeries. Now coming on to the possible results of a pocket therapy. So generally, your pocket, it has more amount of calculus or dental biofilm like this, and because of that there is more amount of inflammatory mediators within your connective tissue, and therefore an active pocket would be having an underlying bone which is lost and a bleeding on probing positive condition in case of an active pocket. But after phase 1 therapy, the inflammatory changes in the pocket wall subsides, thereby rendering the pocket inactive and reducing its depth. But after that, again, if it heals, then in case there is an inactive pocket which heals with a long junctional epithelium. In other words, it means that this long junctional epithelium is considered to be a little unstable in its healing, and therefore this is not considered to be a very accurate healing method for the pockets. Whereas reducing it to the previous healthy sulcus, like for example 2 to 3 mm, is considered to be one of the best methods for pocket healing. So here you can see a condition where the pocket has been reduced at this despite the tooth structure being exposed, the pocket has been reduced to the normal physiological depth. Here there is no gain of attachment present, and there is exposed tooth wall also present. But there is one good thing here is that the physiological sulcus depth is around 2 to 3 mm. And another thing is that We can also re-establish that the healthy sulcus can be located coronal to the bottom of the pre-existing pocket. We can re-establish a status which was there previously present before, like for example a good periodontal ligament, alveolar bone, and a normal physiological depth of 2 to 3 mm can also be restored, which is considered to be an ideal condition but can be done. So more reliable and stable results are obtained by transforming the pocket into a healthy sulcus. Now coming on to the indications for pocket periodontal surgery. So this cycle is to be made in notice for you guys, wherein whenever the patient is going to allow the plaque accumulation to take place, that results in gingival inflammation, and that results in further pocket deepening, and that results in further plaque accumulation, and therefore this is a vicious cycle. So we have to break this cycle. So whenever there is going to be plaque accumulation occurring, this cycle is broken by from going to the gingival inflammation by the patient by doing his own oral hygiene measures. But even at this portion, if it is not going, then it goes to the gingival inflammation. Again, the cycle from here to here, that is gingival inflammation to pocket deepening, can be broken if the phase 1 therapy is being carried out at the correct time. And even at this procedure it is not going to take place, then the pocket deepens and it goes on to the vicious cycle. And to make it a point, a periodontitis patient remains a periodontitis patient for their lifetime. He doesn't reverse back to the gingivitis or a gingival condition further. And okay, coming on to the indications for periodontal surgery. So when there is pocket deepening, we will be doing periodontal surgery. So in case where pockets on teeth in which complete removal of irritants is not clinically possible, areas with irregular bony contours, deep craters, and other defects, in cases of furcation defects of grade 2 and 3, intrabony pockets on the distal areas of the last molars, persistent inflammation in areas with moderate to deep pockets. Zones of the pockets. So here you could see that there are 4 critical zones. The criteria for the selection of surgical technique for pocket therapy are based on this clinical findings of these zones. The first zone is the soft tissue wall of the pocket, wherein the morphological features, thickness, topography of the soft tissue wall determines the surgical procedure. Persistence of inflammatory changes in the pocket tells what kind of surgery has to be performed. Zone 2 is your tooth surface. If there is going to be deposits or alterations in cementum, then we go in for surgical aspects in relation to it. This determines the accessibility of the root surface to instrumentation. The third zone is your bone, where the shape and height of the alveolar bone next to the pocket wall through careful probing, clinical and radiographic examinations tells us what kind of surgery can be done before the what kind of surgery can be planned before the surgery is being done. Zone 4 is your attached gingiva, wherein presence or absence of an adequate band of keratinized attached gingiva can be done when selecting the pocket treatment method. Next, coming on to the methods for pocket surgery, wherein if there is going to be a pocket, you do have 3 methods for pocket surgery, wherein you can go in for a new attachment, that is you can eliminate the pocket depth by reuniting the gingiva with the tooth at a position coronal to the bottom of the existing pocket, thereby regenerating the bone, connective tissue, periodontal ligament, and the cementum. So one of this I had discussed in the previous slide. The second one is the removal of the soft tissue, wherein there is retraction or shrinkage of the soft tissue which is occurring because of scaling and root planing. There is surgical removal of the pocket by means of gingivectomy or undisplaced flap, apically displacement of the flap by means of apically displaced flap, or we can go in for removal of the tooth side of the pocket, where we can do extraction, hemisection, or root resection. So these are the 3 methods for pocket surgery. You can go for new attachment, or removal of the soft tissue, or removal of the tooth side of the pocket. So next, coming on to pocket reduction versus pocket elimination. Pocket reduction, it generally means that you get a maintainable depth. Like for example, you are having a depth of around 5 to 7 mm of pocket depth. So by doing your surgical procedures or non-surgical or surgical procedures, you get a maintainable pocket depth, but there is no pain, exudate, or bleeding. In other words, this is an inactive pocket. whereas pocket elimination is a procedure wherein the pocket depth is reduced to the previous physiological sulcus depth at the expense of your tooth exposure. So if there is a 7 mm of pocket, this is exposed to around 2 to the procedures are carried on wherein you get a physiological sulcus depth of 2 to 3 mm, and there's the tooth is being exposed at this condition. This helps in maintaining the pocket at the same level, whereas this condition is little unstable. Effects of pocket therapy: when scaling and root planing are done in shallow pockets of less than 2.9 mm, it induces attachment loss, whereas when modifying flap surgery is carried on in results in attachment loss if carried on in pocket depth less than 4.2 mm. So this is to be carried on. Please don't carry out any surgery if it is less than, if the pocket depth is less than 4 mm, and scaling and root planing if it is less than 2 to 3 mm, please don't go in for deep root planing in such pockets. Next, coming on to surgical anatomy, this is mainly discussed here to determine the scope and possibilities of the periodontal and the implant surgical procedures and to minimize their risks. So coming on to maxilla, this is a pad bone and it has 4 processes, which includes your alveolar process, your palatine process, and then your zygomatic process, and then two forms of zygomatic process, and your frontal process. So you can see it very clearly: your alveolar process, your palatine process, your zygomatic process, and your frontal process. So the terminal branches of the nasopalatine nerves and vessels pass through the incisive canal, which opens into the midline anterior area of the palate. This is of small caliber and therefore no deleterious consequences occurs, whereas greater palatine foramen, which opens 3 to 4 mm anterior to the posterior border of the hard palate, has the greater palatine nerves and vessels present. This area has to be little careful, mainly when we are doing the palatal flaps or the donor sides for the gingival and connective tissue grafts should be performed carefully and selected to avoid invading these areas, because profuse hemorrhage may ensue if not taken proper care. So you can see the greater palatine nerves and vessels which are emerging out from the foramen towards the incisive canal. So proper care must be taken when we are going in for graft procedures in relation to these areas. Vertical incision should be avoided in these areas. Apart from that, you do have another anatomic structure in the maxilla, that is your maxillary sinus. The roots of the first or the second molars open it up into the floor of the sinus, and therefore extraction of teeth with roots exposed into the maxillary sinus result in oral antral fistula, oral antral communication. So proper care should be taken. Next, coming on to the mandible. This is a horseshoe shaped bone connected to the skull by means of the temporomandibular joint. The mandibular canal, this is it's occupied by the inferior alveolar nerve and the vessel. This begins at the mandibular foramen on the medial surface of the mandibular ramus, continues anteriorly as the incisive canal and the mental canal. The mental foramen is located on the buccal surface just below the apices of the premolar. Surgical trauma to the mental nerve can produce paresthesia of the lips, which recovers very slowly. The lingual nerve, it descends along the mandibular ramus medial to and in front of the inferior alveolar nerve. It can be damaged during anesthetic surgeries, injection, or during oral surgical procedures. So proper care should be taken care of it. And you do have the muscle attachments here in the diagram. Go through it for your proper understanding. These are spaces which contain loose connective tissue, but they can be easily distended by hemorrhage and inflammatory fluid and infection. Surgical invasion of these areas may result in dangerous hemorrhage, infection, and should be avoided carefully. For example, Ludwig's angina. There are many spaces such as the canine space, buccal space, mentalis space, masticatory space, and here you have the sublingual space, and the darker area shows the submandibular space. So proper care should be taken when invading these areas also. Coming on to the general care of the patient. So generally the preoperative care which has to be carried on just below your surgical procedures, you have to reevaluate the patient for the phase 1 therapy for 3 to 9 months. eliminate some lesions entirely, renders you put the patient under phase 1 therapy, that is reevaluation phase, for at least for a period of 3 to 9 months. This is because some lesions may get eliminated by themselves entirely, thereby eliminating the chance or the need for the surgical procedure, rendering the tissues firm and consistent, acquainting the patient, thereby reducing the patient's apprehension and fear. Premeditation, you can give NSAIDs 1 hour before the procedures or chlorhexidine 0.12% as mouth rinse. Smoking, you can quit or stop smoking for 3 to 4 weeks post surgery. Informative consent has to be taken. Informed consent. Emergency equipments, like in case of syncope, it has to be your apparatus has to be equipped with that. And measures to prevent transmission of infection through infection control protocol and PPE. Coming out of the tissue management, you have to operate gently and carefully. Precise, deliberate and gentle operation has to be done. It is essential to be thorough, but traumatic instrumentation must be avoided. Observe the patient all the time. Facial expressions, pallor and perspiration. If the patient shows any of these conditions, then you have to stop the procedure and take care of the patient first. Success or failure depends on how the patient is during and after the treatment time. Use of sharp instruments to avoid poor cutting and excessive force applied to compensate for their ineffectiveness. So, but during the procedure, if you have excessive bleeding, then in case you need to achieve hemostasis by means of pressure, irrigation with cold sterile water, removal of granulation tissue, use of local anesthesia with epinephrine, or absorbable hemostatic agents such as gel foam, oxygel, hemostat, cola tape, or thrombostatin. So these are a set of surgical instruments wherein you have your diagnostic set, your BP blades with handles, your periosteal elevators, your set of Gracie curettes, and your Cumin scalers, the tissue forceps, holding forceps, the needle holders along with the scissors, the tissue nippers, and then you have your cheek retractor, your bone graft material with the bone graft carrier. So all this should be ready when you're going to do a patient with surgical procedure, as well as your periodontal pack, and this is your LA. So you need to use for the incision, you need to use blades, surgical blades. So you do have different numbers given for the blades, and it is used according to the area which it is needed. 12D blade allows the operator to engage narrow restricted areas with both pushing and pulling cutting motions. 15 blade, you can see the numbers here. The 15 blade on the other hand is used for thinning the flaps and is used for general purposes, whereas 15C blade, which is a narrow version of the 15 blade, is used to make initial scalloping type incision. Whereas the gingivectomy knives, Kirkland knife and Orban's interdental knife can be used when excising the gingiva. So here you can see a picture where we are excising the gingiva. And periosteal elevators generally are used for elevating your periosteum during the procedure. Woodson's, Pritchard's elevators are present. You have the Pritchard surgical curette. The curettes are used during surgery, have wider blade angle than used for the conventional scaling and root planing. You have the DeBakey's tissue catching forceps and the Goldman Fox scissors, which are generally used to remove the tabs of tissues during gingivectomy, to trim the margins of the flap, to enlarge the incisions in the periodontal abscesses, and to remove muscle attachments in the mucogingival surgery. So here you do have the Castroveger needle holder, which is used to suture the flaps at the desired portion after the surgical procedure has been completed. Castroveger needle holder is a delicate. This is on the other hand used for delicate precise techniques that require quick and easy grasp or release of the suture. Back action chisel, this is used for mainly cutting the bones, wherein it is back action chisel is used with a pull motion and Auschenbach chisel is used with a push motion. Periodontal dressing, this comes at the end of the procedure, wherein at the completion of the periodontal surgical procedures, clinicians may elect to cover the area with a surgical dressing. The main uses include assist in healing by just protecting the wound. So this has to be put in bold letters, wherein periodontal dressing don't have any curative or healing factors as such, but it just protects the wound. It minimizes the post-operative infection and protects against pain induced by contact of the wound with the food or tongue. Types of periodontal dressing includes your zinc oxide eugenol, example the Wonder Pack. Since eugenol was little allergic producing, they introduced with the non-eugenol pack, that is the Copac, which we have in the department. Cyanoacrylates or the tissue conditioners are the light cure pack, example the Barricade. Copac, it has two tubes. The first tube is contains zinc oxide, oil flap plasticity, gum for cohesiveness, and lorothidol. And the second tube, it has liquid with coconut with fatty acid thickened with colophony resin and chlorothiamol. So these two are taken in equal quantities and they are mixed. Once they are mixed, they are placed into the saline so that it is being formulated well. So once it has set at nearly for around 30 seconds, once it is started to set, you are going to adapt it to the tooth surface. This retention is obtained by mechanically by interlocking the dressing into the interdental spaces. So you can place it with the help of your hands, and when you are going to insert it into the interdental spaces, use a probe to insert it into the interdental spaces. As a general rule, the dressing is kept on for 1 week after the surgery. Periodontal flaps. So section of the gingiva and or mucosa is surgically separated from the underlying tissues to provide visibility of and access to the bone on the root surface is the flap, whereas periodontal surgery is any surgical procedure that involves elevation of a gingival flap. So here you can see your flap, any section of gingiva or the mucosa which is surgically separated from the underlying tissues to provide proper visibility or access to the inner surfaces of the bone or the root surface. So this is called as a flap. So any surgical procedure in case of periodontics or periodontology would go on with these following steps. First, you go in for local anesthesia, and then you start giving the incisions. Incisions are given with blade, and then you are going to reflect the area so that we are able to see the root and the bone. Flap reflection is being done, and then we are going to debride this area. Like for example, root planing has to be done in case of tooth surface, and in case of the tissue surface, curettage has to be done to remove the granulation tissue. And after this, once if you find if there is going to be any defect present, if it is going to be a 3-wall defect, you are going to go in for regenerative procedure. If it is going to be a 1-wall defect, you go for resective procedure. This is a 2-wall defect wherein we go in for regenerative procedures. We place the graft, followed by which we place the GTR membrane, and then flap is again adapted back, co-opted back, and then sutures are being placed and periodontal dressing is given. So this is a step, or this is the following way how we go in for surgical therapy in case of periodontal therapy. So incisions involve a lot number of incisions. The basis for all the surgical procedures involves 2 major incisions. One is the vertical incision, which starts from the occluso-apical direction, and the horizontal incision, which starts from the mesiodistal direction. Horizontal incisions are of 3 types: internal bevel incision, the sulcula incision, and the interdental incision. So the diagram is given on how it has to be carried on. And in case of vertical incision, the incision should be made at line angles to split not to split the papilla or incising directly over the radicular surfaces. So try to see that you don't make it at the papillary areas. Just try to make it near the line angle area. So you can see the line here where the papilla is getting split, but here you can see that we are placing it in the line angles. We are not splitting the papilla exactly. There are 2 types of incisions. Another ways how you are going to place the bevel of your incision blade. So it could be an external bevel incision or an internal bevel incision. In other words, when you're going to place the bevel, that is when you're going to place your needle, the blade um, of your BP blade on the external surface of your gingiva, and you're going to cut remove it in this aspect, then it is an external bevel incision. You can see that we are placing it at the surface of the gingiva apical to the periodontal pocket. We are removing the soft tissue from this. This is mainly done in gingivectomy. Whereas reverse bevel is, we start the incision itself from the top level, that is, it starts at the surface of the gingiva and we direct it apically to the bony crust. So this has a number of objectives such as removes the pocket lining, conserves the relatively uninvolved outer surface of the gingiva, which if apically positioned becomes the attached gingiva. It reduces the sharp thin flap margin for adaptation onto the bone tooth junction. Bone exposure after flap reflection. After reflecting the flap, if you are taking away the periosteum along with the reflected flap, it is called as a full thickness flap. Whereas if periosteum is left over the flap, it is called as a partial thickness flap. Placement of the flap after surgery. If there are suture at the original portion itself, then it is called as a non-displaced flap. If it is placed a little apical, like in this case, the flap is reflected and it is placed in the apical region, we suture it here itself. Or if it is going to place in the coronal region, that's called as a displaced flap. Management of the papilla. Here in the case of conventional papilla, we split open the flaps at the correct area. The papilla is not preserved here. Whereas papilla preservation flap, here you can see that the papilla, we have moved it to the buccal aspect. We are preserving the papilla, so it is known as a papilla preservation flap. Coming on to the difference, what is full thickness and partial thickness? Full thickness flap is one in which the periosteum is also included in your flap elevation. So incision should be made cut through with the periosteum. So you can see the periosteum is elevated off the bone. Whereas partial thickness flap, the periosteum remains on the tooth surface, only the epithelium and part of the connective tissue is moved behind. Flap coaptation. Non-displaced flap, here in case of placement of the flap back to the original surface, if it is placed back to the original surface after your flap therapy, then it becomes your non-displaced flap. If it is going to be placed a little apical to the original position, then it is said to be an apically displaced flap. Synthetic, polyglycolic, bicryl, ethicon more compared to the other agents. Try to catch it at the most just anterior to the curvature so that it doesn't get damaged. If you're going to catch it at the tip or just behind, very much near to the eye, then you can see the damages which is present. So just catch it anterior to the curvature. The needle is held with the needle holder, and it should not enter the tissues at right angles and be no less than 3 mm from the incision. So here you can see the exact position where the needle should be inserted into the tissues. It should be just 2 to 3 mm from the incisions, and the needle is then carried through the tissues where it follows the needle's curvature. The knot should not be placed near the incision. Flap is closed either with independent sutures or with continuous or independent sling sutures. Whenever you are going to place sutures close to the palatal flap, for slightly or moderately elevated flap, the sutures are placed in this shaded areas. For the more substantial elevation of flap, the flaps are placed in this unshaded area. So mostly just involve this area. Coming on to the suturing techniques, there are a number of suturing techniques. The most often which we follow is the simple or the figure of 8 suturing techniques. We use has 3 components. One is the loop itself, another is the knot, which is composed of a number of throws, 2 or 3 throws, 2 throws, 1 throw, another throw, the ears, which are the cut ends of the suture. So you do have the different types of knotting technique. Post-operative care, patient should be asked to rinse with 0.1% of 2% of chlorhexidine gluconate immediately after surgical procedure and twice daily after thereafter under normal biofilm control. Persistent bleeding, if it is being there, locate the bleeding and achieve hemostasis before sending the patient. Sensitivity to percussion may be present, but please check before sending the patient again. Swelling will be present following the surgical procedure. It will subside within the 4th day. Feeling of weakness will be there for the patient because of transient bacteremia, which also will subside by the 2nd or 3rd day. Pre-medication with amoxicillin should be started every 8 hours, and this should be a protocol which has to be started 24 hours before the next procedure and continued for 5 days post-op. Post-operative pain, if present, can be reduced with the help of ibuprofen. Mouth care should be given. Soft toothbrush with light water irrigation should be done. Regular rinsing with chlorhexidine mouthwash should be done following surgery. Sensitivity would be present, so use of anti-hypersensitivity paste can be recommended. Increased tooth mobility is due to edema in the PDL spaces from the inflammation that occurs post-surgically. The mobility diminishes to the pre-treatment level by the 4th week. So to conclude, I would like to say, respect the tissues, then they will respect you back with good healing. And therefore, whenever you're going to do the procedures, have a very patient-centered approach, which includes oral, intravenous or inhalation sedation in their spectrum of services available. The efficient, precise and minimally traumatic management of tissue is necessary to achieve the most predictable and comfortable result and outcome for the patient. Post-operative care for the patient and biofilm control and success of the procedure depends mainly on the post-operative care by the patient and the biofilm control. Thank you.